"You embarrass me when you talk like that," my husband said at his cousin's wedding, loud enough that the people at our table went quiet. "Just sit there and smile. That's the one thing you used to be good at." I smiled. Not because he told me to. I smiled because 3 weeks earlier I'd opened a safe deposit box at a credit union 2 towns over, and the smile was the only thing keeping me from laughing in his face right there under the string lights. His name was Brennan, and I'd been married to him for 9 years. I want to tell this the way it actually happened, not the way I wished it happened, because the wishing version makes me sound smarter than I was for a long time. The truth is, I was slow. I was the kind of slow that other women watch from the outside and want to shake. I know that now. I've read enough of these stories to recognize the woman who keeps making excuses for a man who stopped looking at her years ago. For most of my marriage, that woman was me. I was 31 when it started, the noticing. We lived in a decent ranch house outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind with a 2-car garage and a lawn Brennan was weirdly proud of. He sold commercial HVAC systems, traveled a fair amount, made good money. I'd given up my job as a dental hygienist when we got married because he said it didn't make sense for me to be on my feet all day when he could cover us both. I let him. I told myself it was a partnership. I told myself a lot of things. The first thing I noticed was the gym bag. Brennan had never been a gym person. He played softball in a beer league, and that was the extent of it. Then one spring he started leaving for the gym at 6 in the morning, and by July his shoulders had changed. His stomach had gone flat, and he was buying shirts a size smaller and standing in front of the mirror in a way I'd never seen him do. I remember thinking, isn't this nice? He's taking care of himself. That's how dumb hope works. It rewrites everything into something good. Then came the phone. He'd always left it face up on the kitchen counter, charging by the toaster. Now it lived in his pocket, screen down, and at night it went into the nightstand drawer instead of on the dresser. When it buzzed at dinner, he'd glance at it and put it away with this little private smile, the kind you can't fake and can't hide. I'd ask who it was, and he'd say work, and I'd nod and we both pretend that was a real answer. The showers were the part that haunted me later. He started coming home and going straight to the bathroom. Not a quick rinse. Long showers, the water running for 20 minutes, and he'd come out smelling like our soap instead of like himself, like a man scrubbing something off. I'd lie in bed listening to the water and tell myself he was just sweaty from the drive. I got very good at telling myself things. The cruelty came slowly and then all at once. Little comments first. He'd watch me eat and say nothing, but his face would do something. A small flinch, like the sight of me chewing was a personal insult. He started sleeping in the guest room. Said my snoring kept him up. Said it like a fact. Like a weather report. I bought those no strips. I tried sleeping on my side. He kept sleeping down the hall. One night I asked him, plainly, if he still found me attractive, and he looked at me for a long moment and said, "Honestly, I don't really think about you that way anymore. I haven't in a while." Then he went back to his phone. I cried in the bathroom with the fan on so he wouldn't hear. The next morning I made him eggs. I'm not proud of that next part of my life. For close to a year I tried to win him back like he was a prize and not a person who was actively despising me. I lost weight. I bought new clothes, the kind I thought a woman married to a man like Brennan should wear. I dyed the gray out of my hair and learned to do the makeup the YouTube girls do. I cooked the meals he used to love, his mother's pot roast, the bourbon chicken from the place we went on our first date. He'd eat it without a word and put his plate in the sink and go to the guest room. I planned a weekend in Hocking Hills for our anniversary, booked a cabin, and he canceled the morning we were supposed to leave because something came up at work. I sat in the driveway with the bags packed and didn't cry. I think that was the first crack of something else getting in. Her name was Whitley. I found out the way you always find out, which is to say carelessly, by accident, by the universe getting tired of watching me play dumb. She was 26 and she worked in the regional office Brennan reported to. I knew her name because she commented on a company photo on his phone once, before the phone went dark in his pocket forever, a little heart and a miss you, boss, that I told myself was just how young people talked. I found out it was more than that because of a hotel. Brennan told me he was at a conference in Cincinnati. A 2-night thing, sales training. I'd stopped asking questions out loud, but I'd started asking them in my head, and the questions had teeth now. So I did something I'd never done. I logged into the credit card account, the joint one, the one he told me not to worry my head about because he handled the finances. I'd never even looked at it. When the page loaded, I sat there for a long time just reading. There was a charge at a steakhouse in Cincinnati for $210. There was a charge at a jewelry store I'd never been to for a tennis bracelet, $1,100, 3 weeks before my birthday, which had come and gone with a card and a gas station gift card inside it. There were hotel charges going back 14 months, not conferences, weekends. There was a recurring charge for a storage unit I'd never heard of. There was a charge for a women's boutique downtown, and another, none of them for anything I owned. I closed the laptop and I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that, because the crying woman had run out. Something cold and clear took her place, and I'm grateful to it, because it's the reason I have my life now. I want to tell you that I confronted him that night, that I threw the bracelet receipt in his face, that I screamed. I didn't, and the reason I didn't is the most important decision I made in my whole adult life. A few years earlier, an old friend from hygienist school had gone through a divorce that flattened her. Her husband had hidden money, drained accounts, lied to lawyers, and she'd reacted out of pure hurt, told him everything she knew the second she knew it, and he'd had 9 months to move assets around before she ever filed. She told me once over wine the thing that stuck. The mistake was letting him know I was awake. The second he knows, the game changes, and he's been playing longer than you have. So I stayed asleep, on the outside. The next morning I made the eggs. I kissed him on the cheek. I asked about his conference and listened to him lie, and I said it sounded exhausting and offered to draw him a bath. He looked at me like I was furniture, which is exactly what I wanted. Furniture doesn't take screenshots. That's what I started doing. Quietly, on my own phone, I photographed the credit card statements, all 14 months. I wrote down the name of the storage unit and the boutique. I found a folder in his email because he'd used the same password for everything since we met, our wedding date, and I'm telling you my hand was steady the whole time. There were emails. There were photos I made myself look at exactly once. There was a thread where he called me in writing, the situation at home, and told her he just needed to handle it the smart way, so he didn't lose half. That word half told me he'd already talked to someone. He was already planning, he just assumed I'd be too slow to plan back. I found a lawyer the way you'd find one if you didn't want anyone to know, an hour away, paid the consultation in cash. Her name was Miss Delacroix, and she was maybe 60, with reading glasses on a chain and the calmest voice I'd ever heard. I laid it all out, the statements, the emails, the years. She listened without interrupting, and then she asked me one question. Did you sign anything when you got married? A prenuptial agreement? We had. I've forgotten about it, almost. Brennan's father had insisted on it, this gruff man who'd built a small fortune in concrete and didn't trust anyone. The prenup said that whatever was separate stayed separate, and whatever was joint got split, and at the time I'd signed it without really reading it, because I was 22 and in love and his father scared me. Miss Delacroix asked me to bring her a copy. I knew where it was in the fireproof box in the closet, and I photographed it that night while Brennan slept down the hall. She called me 2 days later, and I'll never forget what she said. The version your husband is relying on, the one in his head, has you walking away with nothing because he thinks the high earner keeps the assets. But this agreement was written by his father's lawyer to protect the family money, and it cuts both ways. The marital property, the house, the joint accounts, the retirement contributions made during the marriage, those get divided. He can't hide behind being the breadwinner. And Ohio is an equitable distribution state, which means the affair and the marital waste, the money he spent on her, all of that matters to a judge. He's been buying another woman jewelry with marital funds for over a year. We can trace every dollar. Here is where the women in the comments would yell at me, and they'd be right to. Except this time I listened. Miss Delacroix told me 3 things, and I did all 3. 1. Move a reasonable amount of marital cash into an account in my name. Document why. Don't be greedy. Don't trigger anything. Just protect a cushion. I moved $12,000 and kept the records. 2. Keep gathering. Keep quiet. Don't tip him off. Let her file first, so the timing was clean and the evidence was complete. 3. And this was the hard one. Do not confront him. Not once. not even when it killed me. I did not confront him. For 6 weeks I lived in that house like a spy in my own marriage. I made the eggs, I drew the baths, I went to the wedding where he told me I embarrassed him, and I smiled, because Ms. Delacroix had just told me the petition was ready to file. I want you to understand the patience that took. Every cruel thing he said in those 6 weeks went into a quiet file in my chest, and I let it, because anger spent out loud is anger wasted, and I was saving mine. The morning we filed, I made the eggs one last time. I packed a bag the night before and left it in the trunk of my car. He was at the kitchen counter in his gym clothes, scrolling, and he didn't look up when I set the plate down. The process server reached him at his office at 11. Miss Inge, Delacroix had timed it so he'd be at work, in front of people, the way he'd embarrass me in front of people. Though I'll be honest, that part was just for me. He called me 40 times. I let it ring. When I finally answered on Miss People, Delacroix's advice, on speaker, recording, his voice was a stranger's. He went from disbelief to charm to rage in about 4 minutes. "We can fix this," he said. "Baby, whatever you think you saw, we can fix this." I didn't say much. There's nothing to say to a man who spent a year writing the word hath in his emails and only now remembers your name. The discovery process is where his world came apart, and I watched it from a distance, calm. His lawyer, a cocky younger guy, clearly hadn't been told the truth, because he came in swinging like Brennan was the wrong party, and Ms. Delacroix laid the statements on the table, 14 months of them, the bracelet, the hotels, the storage unit where, it turned out, he'd been keeping things he bought for Whitley and gifts he hadn't given her yet. The marital waste was so well documented that the cocky lawyer stopped talking and asked for a recess and came back a different man. The prenup his father had built to protect the concrete money became the thing that pinned him. He couldn't claim the house was his because we'd bought it together with marital funds. He couldn't shield the retirement contributions made during our marriage. And every dollar he'd spent on her came back to me as an offset, dollar for dollar, because a judge does not look kindly on a man who funds an affair with the family checkbook for over a year while telling his wife she embarrasses him. I'm not going to pretend I got rich. These aren't movies. But I got the house free and clear because he wanted out fast and clean once he understood how it looked, and trading his equity for speed felt like winning to him. I got half the retirement. I got the $12,000 I'd moved, plus the offset for the affair spending, which came to more than I expected. I walked out of that marriage with a paid-off house and enough to breathe while I rebuilt. Whitley left him about a month after the divorce was final. I heard it through the grapevine, the way you hear everything. Turns out a married boss who buys you bracelets is a very different thing from a single guy with a smaller apartment and a court-ordered hit to his income and his name now circulating in the regional office in a way that did him no favors. There was a quiet HR situation about her relationships with men above her on the org chart. I didn't celebrate. I'd stopped thinking about either of them, mostly, but I won't pretend I didn't feel something settle when I heard. What I did next is the part I'm actually proud of. More than the divorce, I got my hygienist license reinstated, took the refresher courses, and went back to work in an office 10 minutes from the house. The first paycheck I earned in 9 years I framed the stub of. It's on my wall. I painted the guest room, the one he'd slept in to get away from me, a color called Morning Fog, and I made it into a little reading room with a chair I picked out alone. I learned that the lawn I'd thought was his pride was just a lawn, and I let half of it go to wildflowers because I liked them, and there was no one left to tell me I embarrassed him. I'm 34 now. I had coffee last week with a friend whose divorce taught me everything, and she said something I keep turning over. She said the cruelest thing he did wasn't the cheating. It was making me believe, for years, that I was the one who'd become hard to love, when the whole time he was the one who'd left. He just hadn't bothered to tell me. I think about all those eggs I made, all those baths I drew, all that effort to win back a man who'd already decided, and I don't feel like a fool anymore. Because that slow, patient woman, the one the internet would have wanted to shake, she's also the one who stayed quiet for 6 weeks and got me out of there with my home and my dignity intact. He texts sometimes on holidays, says he's changed, says he thinks about me. I read them and I put the phone face down on the counter, screen down, the way he used to, and I go make myself something good to eat. And I sit in my reading chair in the room that used to be his hiding place, and I eat every bite without anyone watching my face. I used to think the lesson at my marriage was about Brennan, about what he did, about the bracelet and the hotels and the storage unit full of gifts for a woman half my age. But the longer I sit in my reading chair in that fog-colored room, the more I understand the story was never really about him. It was about what happens to a person when they decide that staying quiet is not the same as being weak. Everything that came apart for Brennan came apart because of choices he made and then refused to look at. He spent the family's money on another woman for 14 months and told himself there'd be no bill. He wrote the word half in his emails and assumed I'd be too slow to ever read them. He built his whole plan on the idea that I would react instead of think, that I'd scream the moment I knew, the way most hurt people do. Cause and effect is patient like that. It waits. The man who set up a separate bedroom to get away from me was the same man who handed me the evidence, because cruelty makes people careless, and carelessness leaves a trail. What saved me wasn't luck, and it wasn't revenge. It was 3 things I had to grow on purpose because they didn't come naturally to the woman who made eggs every morning for a man who despised her. The first was simply doing the right thing, even when no one was watching. Not stealing, not lying, not draining accounts out of spite, just protecting a fair cushion and letting the truth do the heavy lifting. A judge believes a woman who kept clean records. A judge does not believe a man who hid a storage unit. The second was learning to think before I felt. For years I let hope rewrite every red flag into something innocent. The morning I read that credit card statement, I made myself go cold and clear instead of hot and loud. I listened to Ms. Delacroix, even when every cell in my body wanted to throw the receipts in his face at that wedding. Knowing what to do is one thing. Knowing what to do is, and having the discipline to wait, is what actually wins. And the third was the hardest, because it looked like nothing from the outside. 6 weeks of making breakfast for a man I was divorcing. 6 weeks of smiling while he insulted me in front of his family. That wasn't weakness. That was the kind of strength nobody claps for. The quiet endurance of holding a plan steady while your heart is breaking. The internet wanted to shake the slow woman I used to be, but she's the one who got me out with my home, my dignity, and a paycheck I framed on the wall. If you're sitting in a marriage telling yourself stories the way I did, I won't tell you to forgive or to rage. I'll only tell you this: stay decent, stay clear-eyed, and stay standing. The life on the other side is quieter than revenge and so much better.